Welcome to the Living Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Preston M. Smith. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Living Artist Podcast. I'm Preston M. Smith, at PMS Artwork everywhere on internet land and socials. I want to thank you for landing on this podcast. Whether you're a professional artist, just getting started in the art world, a collector of art, or just consider yourself a creative person, this podcast has something for you. I like to think of it as a fun way to rant and talk to other creative people about living the life of an artist, surviving and getting ahead in the art world, and enjoying your life. But most importantly, not waiting until you're dead to make it happen. All right, let's get started.
Preston, how's it going?
Michael, how are you?
I am doing well.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so did you get the creepy recording voice at the beginning?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
I got it.
That always signifies the start.
Yeah, it's a good thing to signify, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. So for everybody listening, we're here with Michael Facchinello of Altamira. Did I say your name right?
Closer than most people get it.
Okay.
It's Facchinello, so like fashion jello.
Yes.
I think in Italy they pronounce it Facchinello, but
Facchinello, yeah. Okay. So
somehow it got Americanized.
So Facchinello.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we're here with Michael Facchinello of Altamira. And you and the company are based out of Denver, Colorado, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I'm sitting here in Denver looking at some beautiful weather
Nice.
out the window, which is a change over the last few days. There's been crazy rain and hailstorms all around. I think there's
wow.
2 feet of hail in Estes Park. It looks like winter up there.
Really?
Yeah, kind of wild.
Man. I'm here in the valley in Los Angeles, and it's just hot all the time, 100-degree weather all the time. But I was actually born in Denver. And
really?
Yeah, I grew up in Denver and Wyoming, and my best friend lives in Denver.
It's amazing.
Haven't been back in a while, but I want to get back there. I know there's a big tech boom in Denver for a while now. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, I think all the major cities are trying to instantiate some sort of tech boom.
Yeah.
And Brad Feld certainly has helped bring it to Boulder and Denver, and sort of helped establish the startup community tech boom craze. But certainly there's a lot of tech employees who want to live in a place like Colorado, Denver, Boulder, what have you. And so it's done pretty well.
Yeah, it's beautiful over there. I had Joe Clark of Get the Gallery on. I don't know if you know each other, but he also did a kind of art startup there. It was like a art rental program, and they would deliver the art, and you could kind of hold it for as long as you want and then change it out. But he was also from the Denver tech area. Do you know Joe?
I don't know Joe, but I'll be sure to look him up.
Yeah.
It's a small little world, so a lot of times you will know the name, but in Joe's case, I don't.
Okay. Well, anyway, let's get started I always start everybody with the origin story, and I want to hear how you get started, how it can kind of bleed into, obviously, Altamira if you want as well. But you can start as early as you want, take as long as you want.
Great. Well, yeah. So I was born and raised in Colorado. And since you're familiar with it, hopefully you'll know some of the places. But I guess just to give a little insight into where my art origins begin, I spent a lot of summers growing up with my grandparents in Aspen. They were big art collectors, so I would see art on their walls all the time. And actually, my aunt owned an art gallery in Basalt. So I spent a lot of time in the gallery too, and just got to be fascinated by the art and absolutely loved everything she had. And of course, what my grandparents had, but really got interested in the business as well. And just sort of how my aunt would weave narratives around art and how that was so important to the actual value and sale of the work itself. And then fast forward, I guess, well, in my grandparents just seeing that love or interest in art actually bought me my first piece, I think on my 10th birthday, something like that. Wow. And that work is still hanging above my couch downstairs.
Nice.
And so that kind of was the starting point for it. And I guess in high school, I was sort of entered into the county art show. I don't know if you're familiar with Douglas County, but
not very much. No.
yeah, just a small little that's what the high school was called, Douglas County, but that's also the county art show I got entered into, and actually for woodworking, not for what you would consider traditional art. But I won first place in that, and the my teacher entered me in without asking. So I guess that's a little extra points on it.
Yeah, you've already won somebody over.
Yeah, that's right. And then so went to college in Fort Collins, ended up flipping a coin on whether I wanted to live in Chicago or New York after I graduated, and ended up in Chicago, where I sort of got into the tech scene. I actually helped launch the Chicago Venture Summit.
Oh,
I met a guy. Yeah, I met a guy by the name of Phil Nevels when I was just trying to get my career figured out. And he was tasked with starting the Chicago Venture Summit by J.B. Pritzker, who's now the governor of Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, he was just a big tech investor. Pritzker Group was and maybe still is the sort of most important VC in Chicago. And so happened to meet Phil, and he asked me to help him get that started. And through that, I started working at an agency called Click Studios.
Mm-hmm.
The Chicago Venture Summit needed a website. I convinced Click Studios to build it for us for free. And then I ultimately ended up joining their team as a user experience designer, and then ended up graduating up from that to launching and managing new offices. I launched and managed our Denver office, launched and managed our Austin office. And I guess the one interesting thing about Click Studios, there we were headquartered out of the Fine Arts Building in Chicago, off of Michigan Avenue, which was originally a wagon dealership. And then the Studebakers transitioned it into an artist commune.
Oh, wow.
And so every day I would walk into work and would walk by all these artist studios. And then every evening I would walk out and go by all of these artists in their studios creating things. And so I was building software, websites, apps for clients every day, and sort of started having this idea around a better way to facilitate the sale of art online. And I just looked out, and this was probably 6 or 7 years ago, and just didn't see anything that I thought was doing it right. None of the platforms, in my opinion, really utilize what technology is capable of providing. And the art sale is just so much different than selling a book or selling a pair of pants, where it's, you know what you want, you just need to find it. It's something where you don't know what you want in most cases. Sometimes you don't even know what your taste is. And so you need some more help in facilitating that decision process. And so with Altamira, we try to do that. And instead of having the validation or the education or whatever be us, we ask the community to help with that. And so an artist posts a work on Altamira, and then we ask the community to upvote the works that they like, kind of like Reddit, and then leave critiques and comments on the work as well. And so that serves as sort of a neutral third-party validator for somebody who is maybe not a savvy collector, but just wanting to make sure that the thing that they like isn't like bad taste or something to that tune. Which that's the case for a lot of sort of inexperienced collectors. And then on the flip side, for more experienced collectors, it just gives them another proof point or something if they're looking for an investable piece, or if they just want to know that this up and coming artist is as good as they think they are. There's that credibility that's building, which we think is also great for the artist. And that's kind of our focus, is being as artist centric as we can, and trusting that doing that will be the right strategy for us as well. But it's both selfish and altruistic to want to just help the artist as much as we can.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love
Yeah.
that. I love the story. I love the building. I love the inspiration from walking by all these artist studios all the time. And yeah, you're right. I think purchasing art is a big commitment for people. And I think they feel nervous. It's like you're used to going into galleries and kind of having it be this cold environment where you feel like everybody's like, you're not really welcome there. I think a lot of people feel that way,
Yeah.
or that somehow you're looked down upon. And I love the fact that, you're validating the purchase and you're also kind of welcoming people in with open arms. And when I sell work online, I'm always about that. I want to connect with the story with people. I want people to know what I'm doing in the studio, a little bit of my sense of humor, my backstory. I also want to validate it I always tell people, like, post your sales, post your sales online. I always post my sales on Instagram, and it does validate for people. They go, oh, this artist is selling. Other collectors are buying. Oh, somebody bought from the UK or somebody bought from Germany. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying.
Totally. Yeah. And when there are actually some galleries to kind of make your point for you that will do background checks before you can actually purchase from them.
Oh, wow.
And will make requirements around, if you buy this piece, you have to buy another and donate it to a museum or this, that, and the other. And that's obviously on the really high end.
Yeah.
On the lower end, like, I have friends who wouldn't consider themselves art collectors, but one of them was on vacation, saw a piece of work they really liked, and then started talking to the person working in the gallery. And he said that she was really, really nice, but he also felt like she was a salesperson and was just trying to move artwork and not necessarily helping him understand making what would drive a purchase for him. And so he didn't end up buying. He didn't feel like he was educated enough to make that purchase, which is too bad because it was probably an amazing piece of work.
Yeah. And I love that. I think you said it was your grandma or your grandfather who was making those connections with people with the art in the gallery, right?
That was my aunt.
Your aunt. I'm sorry.
Yeah. My grandparents lived in Aspen, spent time there, and then would go to my aunt's gallery in a town or two over, Basalt. But yes, exactly.
Yeah, making that connection is so important. I want to get into Altamira a little bit. First of all, how long ago did you start this?
Yeah, we launched in September.
Okay.
So we're less than a year old and just been kind of growing every week, every day, every week, every month, and just doing our best to help our artists and promote them, grow them, help them make sales, etc. And that's really been our focus up to this point. But it's been really fun. And I guess, should I back up? And I sort of gave an overview of Altamira as I was giving the origin story, but
yeah, tell us about it.
Sure. So our mission is to enable anyone who wants to participate in the art world. And to do this, I kind of touched on this, but we're really focused on being the first choice of an artist to sell their work, grow their audience, their brand, however they want to think about that. And I think the way that we do that is we're a communal marketplace or a social marketplace for art, artists, critics, fans, collectors, and we facilitate community that we aim to provide education, social proof, emotional connection, and seamless transaction. Ultimately, we're aiming to democratize the art world, opening it up to anyone who wants to participate, like I said. So that's kind of the sales pitch, if you will, or the microwave, or I almost said
we've got 40 seconds
pitch.
in the elevator. Pitch it to me.
Yeah.
Well, so what's the vetting process for artists like?
Yeah. So when an artist signs up, we put them through a verification process. And because we don't want to be in the position of determining if an artist is good or bad, we think that's the community's job. We basically verify that they are a working artist, that they are selling work or have a body of work. And then if they meet that requirement, then we allow them to come in. Yeah. And then as they post their work, we ask the community to help us vet what gets more attention or what gets seen more prevalently through upvotes. And that's similar to what you see on Reddit. Or if you're familiar with Product Hunt, it uses a similar mechanism or convention. And it really is a more democratizing force, where hopefully the best stuff is getting highlighted via voting mechanism.
Yes.
So that's kind of the gist of that. And like I said, we don't want to sit in a position where we're actively gatekeeping. We let the curation happen through the community and let it be open in that way.
Yeah.
We have a gate. It's just not a very bolted down gate.
Yes. The gatekeeper is very mellow.
Yeah.
It's like, come on in. So I like the upvotes thing. I was wondering, do you think there's any fear of people kind of doing favors for each other, getting a community where they're like, oh, you upvote me, I'll upvote you, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that is something that is certainly possible. I think that in that particular instance, it's not necessarily a terrible thing.
Right.
It kind of has an analogy to the real world where one artist will promote another artist at their show or whatever. And if those community bonds are tightening, then it's a benefit to the overall community. What I think we actively monitor and ensure doesn't happen is people signing up with fake accounts and upvoting their own work, or using bots to sort of tip the scales.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm more concerned about. I think things that actively encourage community building is better for the overall ecosystem. So if one artist always upvotes another artist, maybe they just think their work is amazing. And certainly probably wouldn't be doing that for an artist that they didn't respect or like in some other way.
Right. And it's encouraging artists to make connections. So a lot of being an artist is kind of isolating, and getting people to talk to each other can be a good thing, I guess, right? Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a couple of things that I like from looking at Altamira. We talked about this. I was looking at this as kind of a fun vetting process for me because I want to join Altamira too, but I wanted to talk to you before I did it. And some of the things that I really like about Altamira is, well, first of all, the 10% commission. And I'm going to give you a chance to talk about these afterwards. But 10% commissions is amazing. White glove delivery is wonderful. I like the resale commission for artists. If people, you can tell me more about that, but if somebody resells a piece, you get a commission on that. The referral program, I like, and I want to hear more about the future of NFTs on the platform. And I think that's it. I did want to talk a little bit also about the critic aspect about that, but let's first start with this. Are any of those that you want to highlight or talk about or elaborate on?
Well, I think I'm going to start with the critics, if you don't mind, because it kind of parlays off of the last point we were talking about of gaming the system. We do have a lot of other people on the platform that aren't artists. We do have a number of critics that are on the platform that their job is a critic in the real world. And one of the things that we do is we do weigh votes differently, whether you're an artist, critic, or what we call a fan. And a fan could be a collector, it could just be an admirer, what have you. And so by having these different user types, these different vote weights, we think that you can get a little bit, helps minimize some of the nefarious behavior that can happen, in addition to some of the algorithmic stuff that we have. And it's something where, sort of like Rotten Tomatoes, when you are looking at a specific work, you can see how that's the total vote number is composed, whether it's a bunch of experts, both
top
artists and critics. Or if it's just the general sort of population of fans. And so it gives you a little more granularity as a collector to see, is this something that's really just like a piece of pop art that everybody seems to like, but maybe isn't like critically acclaimed? Or is this something that most people don't necessarily love, but all of the critics seem to, for whatever reason?
Right.
So
a little more esoteric.
And I'm sure let's jump into the critic stuff more after. I'm sure you had a different question, but wanted to give that. As far as the commission, we just looked at it and said, what is the lowest possible number that we can take and be a viable business? We want to, obviously we need to market our artists, hire, do the things that make a business run. But you do look at the other platforms that are selling art, and they're right around 30-35%. And
up to 50.
And doing the math, like what they looked at is galleries are taking 50%. What's a number that is a big enough departure from that 50% so that it's desirable for an artist, but not what is the number that is economically viable and benefits the artist the most.
Yeah.
And we really just want to empower artists as much as we can. We think that we can do right by artists, and artists would prefer to sell on Altamira, then that helps us go a long way in attracting the right collectors, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the thought process there. And
do you see that? I'm sorry, I'm going to ask a hard question. Do you see that going up in the future? Because I've seen other platforms try like 20% and then now they're at 30, 35. As you scale, do you see that potentially going up at all? And you don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
No, I'd rather just give the flat out honest answer. There's a world in which we stratify the commission. So if you are selling exclusively through Altamira, then it would be 10%. If maybe you have it on several of the other marketplaces as well, then potentially it'd be 20%. And then we've talked about, and this would be long into the future, but stratifying it based on engagement. So if you're one of our top artists, then we'll reward you with a lower commission. If you're somebody that's more just trying to extract value instead of building it in, if you're not actively engaging, maybe you're just posting once a week, then, or once a month or whatever, and you're not participating on other people's works, then maybe it'd be higher. But that I think is long into the future.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Yeah, and just something that we know is probably likely in the future, but it's really just to benefit the artists who are more bought into Altamira, and not to penalize the other folks, but just to sort of help us make more money so we can market the other folks more effectively.
Definitely. Yeah, that's practical. And I still think 20% is pretty low. But yeah, you have to, honor the people who are actually participating in the platform and bringing more people to the platform. So I think that's a good strategy. So talking about, because when I was looking at it, I was like 10% white glove delivery. I was like, how are they doing this? You know what I mean? Yeah. How are they making any money? And I know the white glove delivery is typically for larger and more expensive pieces, correct?
Yeah. So as an artist is posting their work, they have the option on what sort of shipping they want to go through. There's two options. There's white glove and there's self-ship. Both of those, we are dynamically calculating the shipping costs at the time of purchase, and then the collector or buyer ends up paying the shipping price.
Yes.
And so if you were to select, so I guess the one thing to note here is if a piece is more expensive, then like you said, we recommend the white glove. If it's a less expensive piece, then we recommend self-ship, just because that also has a cost implication for the ultimate buyer. And art is expensive to ship. So if you're selling something for, let's just use a $50 as an example, which I don't know if anyone has anything on the site for that amount, but if you were to do white glove, then the shipping's probably going to be at least as much as the work itself.
Right.
And just with psychology, nobody is going to want to do that. So that, but to give a little description on how that works, we, like I said, price is dynamically calculated, collector pays for that. And then once the sale goes through, then our shipping partner and provider will get in touch with the artist either through email, text, phone call, and will then coordinate a pickup at their studio or their home or whatever address that they indicated when they uploaded the work. And then we'll show up there, we'll pack the work and then get it to the end destination.
That's another thing, just to stop you for 1 second, that's different from, because I'm on a lot of different art marketplaces too, and galleries. And a lot of people don't, like, they'll maybe take care of the shipping aspect of it, sending you the label, but packaging the work, this is a first. I've heard other marketplaces talk about it, but nobody's implemented it. So that's bold. And I really like that.
Yeah. It's just, when we first started thinking about building this and talking to a lot of artists, a lot of them just said shipping is the thing that scares them away from from selling their own work the most. They just want to produce stuff. And if they're able to get into a good gallery, they're willing to basically give up a lot of the sale price because they don't want to deal with it. And so we wanted to be able to minimize that as much as we could, where it's like you're still basically just able to create your work. Somebody will just show up at your studio when something sells, and no different than when you're getting something to a gallery, either your gallerist is showing up and grabbing it from you, or more likely you're having to bring it to them.
Yeah. And I've shipped over 500 pieces like internationally and nationally, and I have no problem shipping my work, but I still like the idea of having somebody come and package it. Because it does take up a lot of time. I've had times where, like, if it's a complex piece, I've spent 5 hours, just packaging it right and shipping it. So it definitely helps. I like that about it. And then NFTs, we got to talk about because, everybody's still talking about it. When are you thinking about potentially implementing that, and what does that look like going forward?
Yeah, so we've dipped our toes. In June, an artist approached us and wanted to do a drop where they were selling both their physical and a physical print that was accompanied by an NFT, or NFT accompanied by a print, however you want to think about that. And so we basically built some hacked some functionality together to allow him to do that. He dropped his artwork, and all 25 pieces sold under 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
But it isn't a long-term solution. We don't have that open to all available artists, but in effect, we just collected a wallet address for the artist to then airdrop the work to, and allowed for payment process, or allowed people to pay both with credit card or with ETH. And that was kind of the dipping our toes in to see how it went. And it did go fairly well.
Is that through Altamira, or were you like selling it on like OpenSea or something like that?
It was through Altamira. The artist created the NFTs himself, minted them. And then we basically just collected the payment, and then he took care of the rest. So it was a manual workaround. He approached us and asked us to help facilitate it. Yeah. He was doing it as a fundraiser for the victims of the Uvalde shooting. His artwork, he's actually a photographer by trade, but does some amazing sculptures in the project's called Shoot Portraits, Not People, where he takes old camera parts and fashions them into what look like guns. Wow. But it's an anti-violence campaign. So it made sense for us to sort of build that functionality that would probably never get used again. Yeah. And he was on board to do some of that extra manual labor. And I guess the question was, where do we see, or how are we thinking about this long term? And I think for us, we just want to think about the 5 or 10 year time horizon. What will NFTs look like at that time, as opposed to what is the feeding frenzy looked like over the last 24 months?
Right.
And that's obviously we can't see the future, but we've sort of got some different scenarios lined out. And we think that building towards that future will be a lot more interesting for everybody involved. And so we're thinking about things like, how do we connect physical and digital? Can we have physical works that sell that include a corresponding NFT as a COA, or just as an alternative way to experience that work of art? And make that really easy for artists to do? Can we integrate virtual reality? So when you buy a physical piece, you can also buy different NFTs that go with that piece and augment it in some way. Yeah. I think those are the things that we're thinking about and scoping out, and we'll hopefully move on that sooner rather than later. We had started to build a V1 of our NFT implementation in March, and then we decided to hit pause because so much was going on, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't build something for yesterday, but for tomorrow.
Yes. So changing so rapidly.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see. I think some of the NFT projects that have come out have been really amazing, and some of them have not. And I think there are some artists who have played it really, really well, and some artists who have sort of just cashed in, and in the long run, it'll probably be a little deleterious to their overall art value and career.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But for us, I guess stay tuned. I don't want to give too much away. I know I know there are folks from other platforms listening to your show. So
Yeah, they're like, okay, we'll steal that idea.
yeah, and we're small, so we can move quickly, and
Yeah.
that's an advantage for us. But I know in that line of questioning, you were asking about the referral program, and then was there one other thing that's
resale?
Yeah, the resale. So
which also kind of bleeds into NFTs with the resale of that as well.
Well, that's what reminded me of it, that we were talking about NFTs. A lot of what we've done, we've tried to incorporate some of the ethos and like what NFTs have been really cool for artists, just into the overall company. So the referral program, that's basically just an incentive to have great artists help us get other great artists onto the platform. In effect, if you were to sign up and you were to refer however many artists, you would make 1% of all of their future revenue through Altamira. That comes out of our cut, not out of theirs. So, and depending on how much work that those 10 people are selling, it might not be $1 million or anything, but hopefully it'll help make your income less lumpy and just add an alternative revenue stream that you don't have to really think about.
Yeah, I agree. That's great.
And we'll be adding to, right now the referral program is just for artists. And so that way it's sort of a self-selecting community of really amazing artists, but I think we'll open it up to critics and also to collectors in a different way. Obviously we don't want to give a collector a percentage of a artist's revenue over a period of time, but so that'll open up some more here soon, but that's the general basis, and just, again, trying to be as artist centric as we can. And then the referral, or the referral, I just talked about that. Resale. So only artists are allowed to sell on Altamira, with one exception. Let's say I were to buy a piece of work from you, or anyone was to buy a piece of work from you on Altamira, then they could turn around, or I could turn around and sell that work on Altamira. And then when that work sells, then you would again make, I believe it's 2% of that sale price. It might be 1%. I don't remember off the top of my head. And that continues in perpetuity. So if you're a young artist who maybe sold the work for $500 and then you catch fire, and 2 years later, your stuff's selling for $10,000, $50,000, whatever.
Which, unlike an auction house, the artist sees nothing of that, right?
Yeah, I think there've been a couple of states and a couple of countries in the world that have tried to enforce this sort of resale commission, and they're so convoluted that the legislation just doesn't hold water at all, and it's completely unenforceable. But because everything happens through the platform here, it makes it so it all just computationally happens automatically. And so there's no legislation or enforcement. And obviously, if somebody sells it outside of Altamira, then we can't enforce that. But what we've done is just tried to make it, again, as easy as possible for that collector to do. They're also getting the lowest percent taken away from them that basically you can have taken selling art anywhere. So the incentives are all aligned for them to want to do that. And hopefully the good feels of kicking some monetary value back to the original artist is an incentive too.
Yeah, it kind of benefits every party involved.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah. I was listening to the Freakonomics podcast on art, and there's a story in there of an artist being very angry at one of his collectors who sold the work for a ton of money. And then the collector being like, "What are you upset about? Now you can sell your work for this much money."
Yep. That's the being very short-sighted.
But it would also be, it would be very nice to also be rewarded. Like, royalties exist in almost every other creative industry, and it's sad that it doesn't for art. So that's what we're doing with that.
Yeah, maybe that will be changing, but I love that Altamira is doing that. And you're right, though. I always looked at it that way. Well, if somebody buys my piece for $1 million or auctions it off later, well, I can start upping my prices, and it helps my clout as an artist as well. So I always am encouraging artists to kind of take the long view or play the long game, not the short game.
Yeah, totally.
But I wanted to ask you also about the critics. So
Yep.
I like the idea of critics, and you've referenced Reddit a couple of times. The only thing that scares me, especially with art, because I know a lot of artists have had horror stories about people trashing their work, and hounding them. And like I had somebody on eBay back in the day who's just like, I want you to die. And the person was obviously had a mental illness, but it's just, are there any safeguards to that kind of bile that people are spitting out on Reddit on the platform?
Yeah. So we've got community guidelines in place, and certainly if somebody's being malicious, then that stuff will get removed. But I think that on the flip side of it, great art divides, and likely if somebody feels the need to go and rip a piece of work apart, then there's probably somebody on the opposite side that absolutely loves it for either the same or different reasons. And so I don't know. I think, and we actually haven't seen this ever happen on Altamira. I'm sure that it will at scale. Everything happens, as somebody once said. So there will be a time that it happens, and we'll just monitor and sort of build those safeguards as it's happening. But I think a lot of time controversy can be a good thing for folks. If somebody hates your work, it's better than them not having any feelings about it at all.
It elicited some sort of response.
Yeah, totally. And it's been interesting with the critiques, because for the most part, it's on specific works of art and not on the artist writ large. And that's just a different experience for artists. I don't know if this would sort of track with your experience, but one of the artists I was talking to was telling me he's been critiqued, he's been in newspapers, but usually it's one or two sentences on individual pieces in the body of work, and then a bunch of fluffery around the whole body and around the artist themselves. And so with this, when getting those critiques on the individual pieces, it's just a different experience for them. It helps them see their art in a different way. And this particular artist, it's like, I have an idea of what this is going to be when I create it, and what it means. But I don't think the meaning's ever truly done until I start hearing what other people think about it. And then it comes full circle for me. So
and it also gives you a different perspective to look at your own work, which I found valuable in the past. I was like, I didn't even realize that was going on. But if somebody sees that in the work, it's there,
Totally. Yeah. And I think for the collector or the novice collector, let's call them, it gives them a specific way to look at specific works. You might, with the newspaper review, you're like, okay, this is a good artist, but which work should I buy from them?
Right.
And this, you can look through and see what the analysis is on specific pieces of work and see if that jives with you, or even just helps you get a deeper understanding of how other people are looking at art. Even if you don't like that specific piece, you can sort of start to view the rest of the works on the platform through that lens.
And I think also it gives artists an ability or a chance to be able to define their work better, because I think a lot of artists are really, they do a poor job at talking about their own work. And that's something that's a skill that we need to improve upon. And starting to have a dialogue with critics or collectors is very important, because it helps you to define your work, but it also helps to kind of validate it, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. It is a two-way conversation. So when a critic posts something, there have been cases where an artist has been like, I agree with this. This wasn't exactly what I was going for. So through the conversation, it actually helps further define the work in a way that they didn't necessarily have to write a whole pitch on the work itself. They let sort of the conversation define it, which I think is a way more interesting way to think about art anyway. They're conversation pieces. If you're a collector and you are displaying art, you probably enjoy talking about it in a conversation rather than just having like, I don't think any collectors have the paragraph underneath the work in their home.
No, but they know the talking points. And I think you're right. It also, let's say a collector is trying to collect for the first time in Altamira and they see a dialogue under a piece and then they end up purchasing the piece. It gives them a talking point. It says, oh, I really like, this is how I connected with this work. And now I can also, any guest that comes into my home and looks at the piece, I can then kind of regurgitate that, the bad imagery there, but
totally. Yeah. Or you can add to it, like, this is what this critic had to say, but here's what I think.
Exactly. I like that.
I think it's just a really cool way to help a narrative develop around a work of art. And like the really old pieces of famous work, nobody knows what Da Vinci was thinking on Mona Lisa, but what's interesting about Mona Lisa is everybody has their own take, and there's been such a massive conversation around it.
That's so true. Yeah, and it's been referenced in so many different types of art forms, movies, and music. So I like also on Altamira that you can change the filters, because I know you have the upvote system, which prioritizes like which pieces are being seen. But if you wanted to change the filters and see just the new work, you can do that, correct?
Yeah. So you can sort it by newest, most upvoted. Something that we're getting ready to push out is just even more filtering to be able to see most upvoted in a certain time frame, and just add a little bit more control over how you're looking at that. And then, of course, just all the standard filters that you might expect on a e-commerce website for art,
like size, price, all that.
Yep, size, price, style, things like that. So that's all available, and then just a pretty robust search functionality that you can search for artists or works or what have you, keywords, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because I think some artists might be afraid to come on the platform and be, well, maybe I'm not going to get upvoted. Maybe my work's not going to be seen. But that also gives you the ability to have your work seen, and then focus on, getting some upvotes as well.
Totally. Yeah. And the way we have thought about the artist profiles is it should serve as a little miniature website. You're able to put the work on there. We're improving those profiles even more to where you can add some more credentials, add upcoming events, add any news clippings or whatever, or links to news articles that maybe you're mentioned in. Cool. Yeah. And that's something that collectors want to see, but something so that if you're using your own website to sell your work, you're going to have to push people to it and do all the SEO and everything else.
It's a lot of work.
And so we want this to be an easy button so that maybe you just don't necessarily need a website anymore. And so even if you're not the number one voted artist in a day or a week or a month or what have you, there's still an opportunity for you to push people to your own presence there.
And with commissions that are that low too, I think that's the reason why a lot of artists want to push people to the website, because they have full control over it. They get most of it. But even with my website, I'm through Art Storefronts, and they take a little percentage even there. It's like 5% or something. But hey, if you're getting 10%, you're getting more eyeballs, and you guys are doing all of the marketing, that's to your advantage as an artist.
Yeah. And certainly we hope artists do some of their own marketing and push their audience to the platform. If every artist pushes 10 collectors or even 2 collectors to the platform, then that's a really concentrated, large audience of collector looking at all of the work on Altamira. And it's sort of this, if everybody gives, then it's better for everybody, including us. But that's not to say we're not doing the marketing or anything like that, but just all of that sort of multiplies and compounds into a better ecosystem than just going it alone with your own website.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, I also want to ask you, I know you have a pretty tight schedule. How much more time do you have?
I can go probably 10 minutes over. So whatever works for you.
Okay. And that's 10 minutes over. I'm forgetting what we had scheduled.
I think we have 15 more minutes scheduled.
Okay, so perfect. Okay,
good for another half hour or so.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to just ask best practices for artists on Altamira. I know the obvious ones are just, engagement and being consistent, but are there any other little tips that you can give artists to be seen, to have more visibility?
Yeah, I think that, I'll start with the basics. It is like any other social media platform. So being consistent, engaging, not just launching and leaving is probably but not
like
just
dine and dash, but launch and leave for the artists.
Yeah. Don't just post your work and then never check back or participate. I think the artists that are doing the best are creating more surface area for themselves to be discovered, whether that means critiquing other artists' work or what have you. So I think that's a really just fundamentally, the more you give, the more you get.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other things, I think, like I said, we're just not that much different from many other social media platforms. Our algorithms, I think, are more straightforward. And so we don't like discount you if you're not doing this, that, or the other. To me, it's just post your work, engage, and then certainly
engage with the community.
Yeah, engage with the community, leaving critiques or comments, upvoting, stuff like that, following other artists, creating collections, just creating more surface area on the platform to be discovered by. Collections is not even something we have talked about or touched on, but that's just a way for people to curate work that they like or fits a theme or whatever. If they want, they can put some analysis around it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something where that's a discoverable thing that then leads back to your profile. And so people can see your whole body of work that way. And so
it connects you with the community more too, right?
Totally. Yeah. So those are kind of just the basics. I think that same as promoting yourself for your own website, the more you can promote yourself or promote your work on Altamira outside of Altamira, that's also a good thing. Mm-hmm. Whether that means putting a link to it on your own website or posting about it in social media, that sort of thing, that always goes a long way. But I think we just tried to build it as straightforward as possible. So you don't necessarily have to figure out how to game it. You just have to be a positive community member.
Yeah, I like that.
And I guess I just think about artists as entrepreneurs. Every artist is an entrepreneur, whether they like to think of themselves that way or not.
I agree.
You have to build a product. You have to market the product. You have to sell the product. And so the more you can sort of streamline those things or find certain efficiencies, the better. And I guess that's not necessarily a tip on being successful in Altamira, but just being successful in general. You're a product creator, you're an entrepreneur, and the product you happen to be creating is a work of art. That probably sounds sacrilegious to a lot of folks who are purists, but
no, it's true. And I'm always saying it on here. I mean, this is called The Living Artist. I fought that for 10 or 12 years, just creating my art, and like somebody will discover me and take over and, take the reins. And what I learned was, well, if you're not getting your work out there, if I'm not taking the reins a little bit, then I'm never going to be successul. So I think a lot of artists who are preaching that or who push back on that is just kind of basically saying, well, we don't want to do the work, or I don't know how to do the work. It's just another skill or a skill set that we have to learn.
Which it is not always the most fun thing to realize, but it's the same in the technical space too. A lot of engineers think if I just build this amazing product, people will find it, and then all my work is like, I don't know. If people don't find it, then the product's just not good enough. I didn't build it well.
Right.
That's just never the case. So
there's so much noise out there. How are people going to just find it?
Totally.
Yeah.
There's one other thing I'll note. Today, actually, we just launched a new feature called articles. So any artists or critics can now write articles. And so that's just another way to create service area and sort of put your thinking and your ethos out into the community. We kind of see it as like a medium, but just for the art community and focused on art. So
kind of like a blog, like a community blog type thing.
Yeah. So I think Medium's the best analogy to it, if you're familiar with that, where anyone can go on there and write. And in this case, it's just artists and critics. Mm-hmm. And then that surfaces to a section of the website for people who are just trying to read about art. But then that also shows up in your profile. So if somebody's looking at you as an artist and sort of wants to see how you think or develop a bond or whatever, draw a connection, they have more ability to do that the same way you might publish a blog on your own website. this is doing the same, but just to a broader audience.
Would this also kind of affect the SEO, like for a certain artist? Like, for example, if Google's doing its crawling or whatever, and they find, oh, this artist has written this article, and then it's going to connect back to this person, or is it just going to connect back to Altamira, or both?
All the above. Yeah. So the interesting thing about SEO is you can't actually rank a website. You can only rank a page on a website.
Yeah.
So when an artist writes a specific article, that page then will rank for whatever topic they wrote about. And so that gives them a much higher likelihood of being discovered, because that article, that topic has a much higher likelihood of ranking than, say, a title of a work with a bare description around it. Because who's searching for, like, let's just say I can't even make up a title of a work off the top of my head. Untitled 3.
Yeah.
Who's searching Untitled 3, and what would they expect to see when they search that?
Right. Exactly.
So yes, it does give you a much higher opportunity to be discovered through Google and just through SEO.
That's cool. I like that. Yeah. So what does it look like? Let's say I go, all right, I'm sold. I want to join. I make it through the vetting process, validated, whatever, as an artist who sells work. And then I get accepted. What does that look like? What are the first steps for an artist who joins?
The first steps are to post some work. We have a little checklist when you first sign up on the things that you should do when you first join the platform. One of the things so verify your email, obvious.
Yeah.
Some of the boring stuff. We do have you connect your bank account. That isn't mandatory before you can start posting and selling. It's just mandatory for us to pay you out.
And this is through Stripe, right?
Yep, that's through Stripe, which, for those that aren't familiar, it's sort of the most broadly used payment processing API that there is. Mm-hmm. It's the most secure. It allows us to directly deposit money into your bank account. And so when you are connecting your bank account, we don't actually hold any of that information. Yeah. That's all being held by Stripe. We have a token, to be a little technical, that references the information on the Stripe side, mm-hmm. so that we can pay you out. But that's all securely being held through all of their sort of security parameters. But like I said, if you're not comfortable inputting that until you sell a work and want to input that after, that's totally fine. But realistically, we suggest you follow 3 artists. We suggest you upvote something. We suggest mm-hmm. you leave a comment or a critique. But you can get straight to posting work, and we've designed that to be super, super simple. We took our leads from Airbnb and Instagram. So if you can post something on Instagram, you can post something on Altamira. And for probably the smaller number of folks who have posted a property on Airbnb, there might be some feelings of the design that are similar, where we tried to just make it super intuitive and straightforward.
That's cool. And are there any like bio, profile pictures, banners, stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's definitely something that we allow you to input through the sign up process. So you can add that as you're signing up, or you can skip that and add it later. But there is an opportunity for you to add a profile picture, a banner, image, bio, and then in the future, you'll be able to add things like upcoming events and articles that you were mentioned in, things like that, to your profile.
Cool. So how are you connecting with social media? What's your presence like on there? And can artists easily share their work that they're posting to their social media platforms? Yeah.
So the sad thing is Instagram, which is probably best suited to sharing art, doesn't allow for any direct connections, which is how they keep their feeds as clean as possible, arguable now. Mm-hmm. But so you would have to just basically repost the work and then put a link to Altamira in your bio and sort of just in the caption, let people know. But we do have a dynamic setup through Twitter where we automatically share stuff on our Twitter from Altamira. But generally it's kind of a manual operation for the artists at this point, where they do have to do a little bit of work to to post it in that separate place and then link back to us.
Mm-hmm.
We do, however, post at least one of the critiqued works a day on our Instagram.
Nice.
And so another way for artists to get their work out there, and we'll usually post the most upvoted work from a day on Instagram. And so between those two things, and we always tag the artist, it's just getting in front of a broader audience.
That's cool. And if you're an artist who has, I don't even know if Instagram still does the 10,000 followers thing where you can have links. I'm not even sure if that's still in place, but you can do a story and obviously, tag Altamira and then even put a link right through to Altamira to purchase the piece. That's always good too, to link you up. Well, I'm going to get into just some kind of quick personal and I guess Altamira based questions, and then we'll get out of here and I'll let you get on with your day. First of all, where can people find Altamira online and on social media? Yeah, it's altamira.art is the URL. And then on Instagram, there's also links to our social media on Altamira. So that's probably the easiest way. Just remember altamira.art. On Instagram, we're art.altamira. And I don't remember our exact username for Twitter, but it's all linked there on altamira.art. So that's probably the best way to go. Okay, cool. So I always do a little rapid fire stuff at the end, but cool. This can be personal and or professional, but like where you see yourself in 5 years, or where do you see Altamira? Any goals for the 5-year period? I mean, I see myself leading Altamira. So it's kind of a tied question. And as far as Altamira goes, I think that we'll continue pushing the bounds on how do we use technology to create community and sort of facilitate the complex sale that is an art sale. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stuff that I think we can bring into the fold in a really simple way that furthers the connection instead of it just being a Amazon e-commerce experience that doesn't really work, in my opinion. I think Altamira, I see us in as many ways as a technology business, as a content business. And I think that we'll develop a lot more types and distributions of content that further support the community and our artists. We are getting ready to roll out something we're calling the Pink Bison Prize. It hasn't been announced yet, but probably once this is out, it will be. Cool. That'll be awarded in February. And basically through a combination of votes, different ways of looking at the votes, we'll get to 20 finalists. And then we're having a jury of 10 critics and other artists pick the winner for that. And the winner will get a cash prize, will display their work on billboards in LA, New York. Oh, wow. And a couple other things I think I'm missing right now, but so we'll further develop that out and hopefully give artists another way to credentialize and make money, and their work will also still be for sale as they enter the competition. So hopefully it's a win-win-win in that way. And you get other exposure in a different way too. Yeah. And so other things like that, but I will stop it there because I could probably ramble on my dreams for a long time. All right. Well, if we ever do a round 2, we'll catch up and go, first of all, did you get to this place? And now what are your new ones? So I always ask superpower to the artist, and that's typically a creative question. Like, what do you do when you're feeling blocked or not creative? But this can be, you also have an artistic and tech background. What do you do when you're not feeling it that day, just to get yourself into that creative state, or maybe just to get through your day, Yeah, no, I mean, totally applicable. I think I've noticed over my career that I'm a momentum person. The more momentum I have, the more I gain. And so I just try to always keep momentum going. And the more that I do, the more that I want to do. So when I get off track, or like I found over the holidays, I always have a little bit harder time revving back up. And so I just sort of trudge through. But that's one thing, is it's just keeping the momentum going, keeping the balls in the air, because it's a lot easier to keep them up than to try to pick them back up and get it going again. Oh, yeah. And then the other thing, I'm just in always such a better headspace when I'm reading. And sometimes I'll get too busy to read or whatever. And it always ends up being
a negative for me and for whatever I'm doing. I especially think biographies help me get back into a positive headspace.
Love biographies.
Yeah, they're amazing. Or books that just sort of, I guess, fiction doesn't really. I love fiction, but it doesn't help me in the same way that nonfiction does.
Yeah.
So, and I hope
I
I'm saying that right.
Oh yeah, I used to be a big fiction guy. That's all I read, and now I find myself doing biographies, self-help. That just gets me in the right mindset. So, going off of that, what is one book that you'd recommend that you've read recently?
Well, I'll give one of my favorite biographies is Surely You're Joking Me, Mr. Feynman.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, which I think is just one that helps you see life in a different way and through achievement, through fun, through the whole sort of creative gamut. And this is a scientist, Nobel Prize winner.
Yeah.
I love that one. But one of the books that I read recently that I just really enjoyed and I think is super interesting, it's called The Happy City Project.
I've heard of that, but I don't know it.
It's one of my, I guess, I won't call it a hobby because I don't actually do anything besides consume information about it, but I really am into city planning and find that fascinating. Cities are the most complex interface or system that we have. And so the Happy City goes through a lot of research and anecdotes around how to construct cities to help the citizens be happier within them. And a lot of the research, like probably the main takeaway that people would remember after is roads are bad.
Roads are bad. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Just people are happier when they have better access to multiple modes of transit. And when walking is prioritized, biking is prioritized. And like I mentioned the Fine Arts Building at the top of the show.
Yes.
The Fine Arts Building was the first building on Michigan Avenue. And there's pictures of it where it's literally a dirt road. There's a person buggy walking or going on it, people walking on it, biking. Nice. That's what roads were originally envisioned as, is just big sidewalks. And then the auto industry kind of came in and lobbied to make it just for cars. And it makes it a much less interesting sort of vibrant communities when roads are the predominant fixture within them. So there's a lot of other stuff in that book, but it's just really fascinating to think about these complex systems and how design choices or how public art or how these different elements within them can connect and improve or change people's behavior.
I love it. And I see a parallel between that and Altamira too, right? The Happy Artist Project, building a place.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think I heard, and I know I got the Surely You Must Be Joking, Mr. Feynman on from Tim Ferriss. I think he might have also mentioned the Happy City. Is it Happy City Project? Is that what it's called?
The Happy City Project. Yeah. I don't know. I definitely got Feynman from Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
The Happy City Project, I just found because I've read a lot of books on city planning and like different dynamics within that. And so that's how I came across that one. I wouldn't be surprised. I know he has mentioned at least one other city planning book that I'm drawing a blank on.
There was one that he was talking about that ended up being like a love story to trees. It like had a different, do you know what I'm talking about?
I can't remember either. I know he mentioned the pattern language, which is like, apparently amazing. I haven't read that one yet, but.
Do you do Audible or are you just reading everything old school?
I do both. Yeah. So I do like to reserve listening for podcasts and then reading for books. I think it's interesting because like podcasts are like having a conversation with somebody or getting to witness sitting in a fireside chat. And I think they light up different parts of the brain. So I like to do both and get a little bit different thing from both. But I do I do listen to a lot of stuff on Audible and I do read quite a bit. My wife probably hates it, but I have just boxes and boxes of books that currently don't have any place. I need to build some bookshelves for it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. My wife's the same with my bookshelves and everything. But well, I'll do two more questions. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. And for any artist listening, it's an important lesson to be inspired and to be fed in different ways. That also feeds your creativity. I'm always saying, don't just consume art. I mean, just fine art or visual art, do movies, books, whatever you can get your hands on, theater, dance. Yeah. I love it. It feeds you from a different angle. So what about biggest failures? That's one that people always push back on, but something you sought out to achieve and didn't go the way you wanted to? And what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I think, something I skipped over in the origin story, when I moved to Chicago, I didn't have any job lined up. I literally packed up my car and was out there a week after college graduation. Had a friend out there. We moved in together. He had a job. I did not. I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
have anything lined up. And the time that I graduated, the economy wasn't wonderful. Very hard to make any inroads when you didn't go to one of the universities around Chicago.
Yeah.
And so I ended up working as an umpire for a single social softball league.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
yeah, the owner of that let me call myself a marketing manager. But realistically, the only thing I ever marketed, I did a trolley crawl for him. But that
Trolley
was,
crawl.
yeah, it just, that period of time was, I think I would consider a failure. It took me over a year to actually get a proper job. And the thing that I learned from it is how to stack successes to lead to bigger successes. I ultimately tried to start a tech business, taught myself how to code an iPad app. It was a in-room hotel concierge for the shortest description. I sold it into a boutique hotel, and
Cool.
then thankfully it was I sold a pilot. So thankfully it was a small enough thing. Coding a production app as your first coding experience is pretty fraught with peril. It went up in flames. Thankfully, didn't damage my reputation too bad, and that all was fine. But I ended up going to a design boot camp out of that,
Mm-hmm.
which is where I met Phil Nevels, which is how I helped start the Chicago Venture Summit, which is how I got my job at Click Studios, and then ended up again just continuing to stack small successes into bigger ones. And so that's, I think, the failure and the takeaway. And that business obviously failed miserably, but was able to take that small win and or small movements and move it into something else. And then at this design boot camp, the reason I met Phil Nevels, I actually won a case study competition that he presented
Oh,
to
cool.
our cohort, and then grabbed coffee with him after. And he told me about the Chicago Venture Summit. I went home that night and scraped the 1,000 top VCs in the country and
Mm-hmm.
sent it to him in the morning. And then every meeting he had about it after, he wanted me to be in.
Oh,
Um,
that's great.
so it's just one small win to the next, and doing free work to build a relationship and going from there.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like looking back on that, you almost can't see that as a failure. It just was the natural progression of things. Everything I look back on in my life that I was like, oh, this was so horrible when I was doing it.
Yeah.
It led me to something that now I'm like, I couldn't see it any other way. So
Yeah.
it's important.
If you've got the right attitude, there are no failures. There are learning, teachable moments.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
Incubation periods, right?
that's right. Exactly.
So one last
Doesn't,
question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it doesn't mean they're any less fun when you're going through them, but
Yeah, that's very true. So, advice to young Michael. I always like to end this with this one because we've learned so much through our lives. And what would you impart on your younger self? It can be at any age. All your wisdom now. What would you impart on your younger self?
it's such a hard one, because to your point on how everything you've gone through leads you to where you are.
Yeah, it contradicts it. Yep.
Yeah, it totally contradicts it, which is an interesting juxtaposition to end with. Sorry, as I'm buying myself time.
I can just put on a little music in the background. No. It doesn't have to be anything super profound either.
Yeah, I think it would just be to start earlier. And
Mhm.
something I've been thinking a lot about lately. I read an article recently that the time that you perceive between age 40 and 80 is the same amount of time that you perceive between age 5 and 10.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and so just get as much out of life as early as you can. And in the context of Altamira, I'd been sitting on this for a long time while working in the fine arts building at Click Studios. And with anything, successes can compound. And so would just be a lot further along and helping a lot more people now if I had started earlier. So I think that would be the advice I would give is you're always going to learn. You've learned a lot there, but start earlier and learn more from this experience than thinking you have to have the resume perfectly lined up, the relationships perfectly built, and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's like growing wealth and compound interest, right? The market's going to fluctuate over time, but the earlier you start, the better. Like all these big, all the big investors, they've made, I think, what was it, like 90% of their wealth in like their last 10 years or 5 years or something like that. So yeah, that is a very important thing. I never thought about it that way from just starting out with making connections and your career, but I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think it applies to artists too. There's a lot of young MFAs coming out that only want to release perfect stuff, or they have to hit these milestones before they can do X, Y, or Z. And sometimes it's just remove the hurdles in front of you and get started with what you actually want to be doing.
Yeah. Do a little Neo. There are no hurdles.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us and for going over 15 minutes. And Altamira is great. I will definitely be joining it in the coming weeks. And I mean, if you'll have me, of course. So hopefully I will be vetted through.
Of course.
So everybody check out Altamira and stick around for just a minute. I want to ask you one more question off mic, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it and enjoy the conversation.
Me too. This has been the Living Artist Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I just want you to know that I appreciate you being here, and I'm grateful to be in your ears. Your art and creative life on this planet is meaningful, so thank you for sharing it with me. If you like this podcast, whatever platform you're listening to it on, please subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also leave me a positive review to show your support. This helps me to reach more people with the algorithmic magic and keep the show going strong. If you want to see more of what I do and check out the art that I create, you can visit my website at www.pmsartwork.com or follow me on social media everywhere at PMS Artwork. That's it for now. See you back here next time.